Hello, and glad you can join us. Here's what's happening inside the politics and priorities on the final day of the G7 summit.
Maximum pressure includes financial pressure.
What's been accomplished even with a notable absence at the table?
People are paying the price of this.
Feeling of urgency.
The escalating crisis in the Middle East and Canadians caught in the chaos.
We delivered a car to a guy that was not alive.
Plus, a dealer lifts the hood on a fleet of stolen cars.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
The final day of the G7 summit with a focus on peace and security, but without the U.S. president, who left Kananaskis for Washington to deal with the Middle East conflict. But not before he spoke favorably of a breakthrough in trade talks with Canada. It left Prime Minister Carney to focus on meetings with the NATO Secretary General, Ukraine's president, and India's Prime Minister. And mid-morning, Canada reaffirmed military support for Ukraine, also adding new Russian sanctions. CTV senior political correspondent Mike LeCouture in Banff now on the politics at play without the U.S. president in the mix. Hi, Mike.
Well, Sandy, despite President Trump's early departure, the summit continued today with a focus on defense and security, and much of that centered on Ukraine. With a heavy heart, Ukraine's president came to Kananaskis, hoping for more support from G7 leaders. But the latest attack cast a shadow over his visit.
Our families had a very difficult night. It's one of the biggest attacks from the very beginning of this war. 440 Shaheeds, Iranian drones, and 32 missiles.
Inviting Volodymyr Zelensky was part of a show of support from world leaders gathered here as the war with Russia rages on. And Canada has gone one step further, announcing today military aid and sanctions.
We are providing additional military assistance, drones, helicopters, broader munitions, over $2 billion worth of assistance directly to Ukraine.
And there's a $2.3 billion loan to help Ukraine rebuild its infrastructure. Canada is also slapping sanctions on 40 Russian entities, a number of individuals, and over 200 vessels in its shadow fleet. The United Kingdom also announced similar sanctions on 20 ships, including oil tankers. But the immediate need in Ukraine is that military might.
It's important for our soldiers to be strong at the battlefield, to stay strong until Russia will be ready for the peace negotiations.
The Prime Minister's office confirms the $2 billion in military aid is helping Canada to reach its NATO spending target. And that earned Carney praise from the head of the alliance.
The fact that you decided to bring Canada to the 2% spending when it comes to NATO this year is really fantastic.
Also at this summit, Canada is looking to rebuild its relationship with India, while an RCMP investigation has connected the Modi government to homicides and extortions in this country. It's a claim the Indian government has refuted. Sandy?
Okay, Mike, thank you. Now, Narendra Modi's visit has angered Sikh activists who allege the Indian government was behind the killing of a Sikh separatist leader in Canada. The group is determined to let the Indian Prime Minister know what they think. CTV's Kathy Lee is in Calgary covering the protest. Okay, Kathy, what are they saying?
Sandy, this advocacy group called Sikhs for Justice, initially angry that Prime Minister Mark Carney invited Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the G7 summit. Today, they are embracing the opportunity while he is on Canadian soil to send him a message. They didn't hold back on how they feel about India's Prime Minister hitting cardboard cutouts of Modi's face and ripping up the Indian flag. They are protesting two main issues here. The first is justice for a Canadian Sikh separation activist, Hardeep Singh Najjar, who was murdered in 2023. The RCMP accused Modi's government of having a role in homicides and extortion inside Canada, while then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau accused Indian government agents of being involved in Najjar's murder.
We hope the leaders of the G7 summit press him and hold them accountable.
This group is also advocating for an independent Sikh state in India known as Khalistan.
India has carried out genocide of Sikhs and ongoing econocide of Sikhs, and we have tried to negotiate with India, but India has not been budging.
While Kananaskis remains blocked off to the public, there is a camera set up in this designated demonstration zone that is live streamed to the summit site. People here are hoping Prime Minister Modi is watching them. Sandy.
CTV's Kathy Lee. So let's bring in CTV's chief political correspondent, Vashi Kapelas, in Banff, covering the G7. Vashi, I want to start with Donald Trump saying he had a good time. Things were progressing before he left for Washington. Does the Prime Minister share of the U.S. President's positive perspective?
Yeah, I think at one point Prime Minister Carney even described what had taken place between himself and the president as fantastic. I think when you're looking at this summit from a bilateral perspective, which is perhaps a little counterintuitive, when you look at the Canada-U.S. relationship and what might have happened during the last 24 hours, I think the view is a positive one, in particular the ability to put a time frame around working out a trade pact between the two countries, a time frame of 30 days. That does signify progress or advancement as far as those talks in the relationship writ large goes. When you're looking at it a little bit more broadly, the conclusion might be a bit different. The fact that Donald Trump left obviously imparts a different sense on what goes on here during the day and consensus or lack thereof around other big security issues. So two different takes, but particularly between Canada and the U.S., when you're looking at it from a bilateral perspective, I do think that there was some progress that we can denote from this summit.
Okay, so big picture, if we factor in all of the leaders there, what was accomplished at this very high-profile meeting?
It's a great question, and I'm going to say like something, but not a whole lot. And I say that because we're just getting word of all these sort of statements that are coming out on various issues, everything from AI, for example, to critical minerals. And you don't really have full consensus on any of them. And in particular, you don't have the United States or Donald Trump signing off on them. So this sort of united front that we have seen in previous years just doesn't really exist across the board. There is a united front against a lot of the policies that Donald Trump is pursuing among the other countries in the G7, but ultimately when you subtract Trump from the equation, the energy goes way down and the conclusions that they're able to reach, I think, ameliorate as well. So we'll see where this goes from here, but ultimately the big thing for Canada, I think, is the progression on a deal with the United States. Apart from that, outcomes are a little more nebulous.
Okay, Vashi, as always, thanks so much. So, the U.S. president back in Washington to focus on the war in the Middle East. This afternoon, he tweeted, "Unconditional surrender." Now, he also wrote, "We now have complete and total control of the skies over Iran." CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbon is here with us now. Joy, let's pick up on Trump's comment about total control of the skies, and then another comment where he says, "We know where Iran's supreme leader is, and we're not going to take him out, at least for now." So, sounds like we, the U.S., is very much involved. Is that the interpretation?
That seems to be, Sandy. That post saying "we" seems to suggest that the president is getting more involved, at least his thinking is. He's got a critical decision here. Does he help Israel, an ally, destroy Iran's underground nuclear enrichment facility? Because we know that only America's biggest so-called bunker-busting bombs can reach there. And warning Iran's supreme leader of assassination should it target U.S. forces. It's a lot of tough talk as Donald Trump's patience seems to be growing thin. Now, Iranian state media just responded in a post saying, quote, "Shut up, Trump." The president, who publicly said he wanted a diplomatic end, is now demanding, as you said, unconditional surrender. Here's what he said on Air Force One.
An end, a real end, not a ceasefire, an end. So something that will be permanent. Yeah, or giving up entirely.
Okay, now, Joy, Donald Trump met with his national security team in the Situation Room late this afternoon. What happened there?
Well, they're not saying, at least not yet. Certainly, it's being reported that his thinking may be changing. The big question, what does this president do next? Now, the Pentagon has shifted warplanes. We know that. An aircraft carrier has gone to the Middle East. And here's a clue as well. Vice President J.D. Vance put out a lengthy statement saying that the president may, quote, need to take further action to end Iranian enrichment. And that's put a lot of Americans on notice. Republicans are very divided, and Trump supporters, they're adamant against U.S. involvement. They're saying, hey, we didn't sign up for this. As for that other warning to Tehran to evacuate, here's the president again.
What was the thinking on the call for Tehran to evacuate? Is there a threat or is there incoming? What was the thinking on the full evacuation?
I want people to be safe. And that's always possible. A thing like that could happen. I just want people to be safe.
These are remarkable developments as this president weighs involving the U.S. military in a strike against Iran. Sandy, it is very risky and the most important decision of his presidency. Sandy?
Okay, Joy, thanks. All right, no sign of de-escalation on day 5 of the fighting, as Israel and Iran exchanged strikes again today. Iran lobbing another wave of missiles at Tel Aviv and the north. Israel hitting deeper into Iran. CTV's Adrian Gobriel now on the Canadians caught in the middle of the Middle East crisis. Adrian.
Sandy, many we've spoken with in both Israel and Iran say they're relying on their families and their faith as they endure wave after wave of deadly attacks. This missile launch from an unknown location inside Iran claims to show an Islamic Revolutionary Guard warhead slicing through the sky towards Israel. At an Israeli air base, an F-15 Eagle fighter jet takes off, strapped with munitions destined for targets in Iran. This young child in a bicycle helmet is among those surveying this gaping crater in central Israel north of Tel Aviv from an airstrike Tuesday morning. Canadian-Israeli Raphael Posh is a paramedic who's worked in multiple conflict zones. The father of 2 from Toronto says Iran's counterattack feels far more threatening than what he and his family have grown accustomed to in recent years.
If one of those missiles hit, it takes down a city block, as opposed to one of the missiles from Hamas would hit. It takes out an apartment, a room, a hole in a building, depending on the size of the rocket. So there's definitely a lot more of a worry, and there's a lot more of a feeling of urgency.
Hamilton, Ontario doctor Panad Baranju took this video following an Israeli airstrike on a building down the street from his family's apartment in Tehran.
It's terrifying, and I was only probably 700 meters away from the blast site.
Baranju is one of the fortunate few to have been allowed to cross into Turkey at a land border. Forced to leave his extended family behind, he took this video of his last moments in Iran as the flash of rockets could still be seen in the sky.
And then I had to sort of leave and say goodbye to them in Tehran, which was very emotional. Especially my mom, because she hugged me and said, "If this is the last time I see you, it's possible." But as sad as it is for me to say.
As of today, at least 224 people have been killed in Iran, 24 in Israel, since the fighting began 5 days ago. On his own social media site, President Donald Trump says the U.S. knows exactly where Iran's supreme leader is hiding, calling him an easy target, though vowing not to kill him, saying, quote, "At least not yet." Sandy.
CTV's Adrian Gobriel. Multiple lawsuits have been launched against 23andMe. That's the genetic testing company hit by a massive hacker breach in 2023. Well, now a joint investigation by Canada and the UK has concluded the company failed to protect millions of customers, including hundreds of thousands of Canadians. CTV's Abigail Beeman now on the data compromised and the cautionary tale. Abigail.
Sandy, nearly 320,000 Canadians were among the 7 million users whose highly sensitive personal information was posted for sale on the dark web. Calling herself a sperm donor kid, Rachel Curry used 23andMe to find 6 half-siblings and her biological father.
It was kind of like putting all the puzzle pieces together with just like a test online.
But she's concerned by new findings from British and Canadian privacy commissioners who report the genetic testing giant didn't properly protect customer data and didn't have safeguards in place to detect or respond to cyber threats.
If that information is compromised, it's kind of scary.
Unlike usernames, passwords, and email addresses, you can't change your genetic makeup when a data breach occurs.
In 2023, a hacker carried out what's called a credential stuffing attack, using stolen login info from other breaches to gain access to health, race, ethnicity information, and more, mostly derived from the user's DNA.
That can be used to craft some very customized messages to us. And anyone who's been caught up in this really needs to have their heads on a swivel, eyes wide open, because they're being targeted now and well into the future.
The UK Privacy Commissioner levied a fine equivalent to 4.2 million Canadian dollars. His Canadian counterpart doesn't have the power to do that.
I will continue to use all the tools that I have, but I need more and better ones.
23andMe declared bankruptcy in March and is in the process of being bought by TTAM Research Institute, a company led by 23andMe's former CEO. In a statement to CTV News, a spokesperson said by the end of 2024, 23andMe had implemented multiple steps to increase security. And as part of the acquisition deal, TTAM Research Institute made several binding commitments to enhance protections for customer data and privacy. The privacy commissioners say they expect the new owners to stick to those commitments, and they'll be watching closely. Sandy?
Thanks, Abigail. Well, an Alberta Conservative has resigned his seat so Pierre Poilievre can run in a by-election. Damien Couric gave up a seat in the Battle River Crowfoot riding. Poilievre failed to win his Ottawa area seat in the April election, and Prime Minister Mark Carney has said he will call a by-election as soon as possible. Coming up, the desperate search for a missing toddler.
We want to find the girl quickly.
And her mother under arrest. The mother of a 3-year-old missing in Montreal has been arrested and charged with child abandonment.
We put many resources to find the girl as soon as possible. This is hard because we have a large area.
Police say Claire Bell was last seen on Sunday morning near her home and was reported missing by her mother hours later in a city west of Montreal. Police found a dead Chihuahua that matches the description of the child's dog and also located the mother's car, a gray Ford Escape with a sign, "Baby on board." Well, U.S. federal prosecutors say a California doctor charged with giving Friends star Matthew Perry access to ketamine in the weeks before the actor's death has agreed to plead guilty. Dr. Salvador Plasencia is expected to plead guilty to 4 counts of distribution of ketamine. Perry, who grew up in Ottawa, was found unresponsive in his jacuzzi in 2023. An autopsy revealed he died from the acute effects of the drug. Well, yesterday we told you about a W5 investigation into stolen cars sold to unwitting buyers. In today's segment, we meet a man who found evidence his dealership was also selling stolen cars. W5's John Woodward is here today. And John, what was this dealer's first clue that something was very wrong?
Well, Sandy, that dealer, Chris Olszewski, got a call from that customer we told you about yesterday saying his car could not be insured. And at first, the dealer dismissed that as outlandish, but then he started to dig, and he found evidence in some 24 car sales files that something was very wrong, and he went to the police.
We have a
I started doing more homework and seeing how deep this problem really went.
Olszewski opened his records to W5.
So these are the suspicious ones right here?
Yeah, these are the suspicious ones.
23 cars that were potentially stolen with suspect vehicle identification numbers, together worth more than $2.3 million. And Olszewski says police told him something even stranger about one customer.
Yeah, he's passed away. He's not even alive. We delivered a car to a guy that was not alive.
How is that possible?
Great question.
I'll say great question. And what a lot of records there, John. Did you have a chance to go through them all?
Yeah, we fact-checked absolutely everything to figure out what was going on in these sales. And while some of those sales appeared to check out, the parties involved confirmed to us what happened. Others, not so much. We had some employers listed in these documents saying, I've never heard of that employee. We had some car suppliers saying, I definitely did not sell that car to this dealership. And what's almost even stranger is we found connections between one car supplier and an employee of that dealership.
And this is all about the VIN numbers, so lesson learned. we're going to have to do our due diligence if we're buying a used car, right?
Exactly.
Okay, John, thanks so much. All right, we're going to take a brief break. When we come back, rocking out at the G7. Meet the designer, tabling unique pieces with Canadian stone. World leaders at the G7 in Kananaskis are not just surrounded by beautiful scenery. I mean, look at the Rockies and Banff. How stunning is that, right? But they're also surrounded by artistic furniture that's reflective of Canada's natural history. And these pieces are the creation of a Montreal designer, as CTV's Kelly Gregg tells us.
From concept to creation, Tom Fugger's designs are centered around Canadian materials.
Like a rubbed gray Tyndall stone, you can kind of see the patterning that appears within the stone itself.
This is Tyndall stone, and it's the inspiration for his latest work.
So it is very much like a Canadian stone, but it's exclusively quarried in Manitoba.
Tyndall stone is featured on the cladding of provincial legislatures, the Winnipeg Art Gallery, and in Ottawa's Centre Block. It's the only Canadian entry that has been designated a global heritage stone.
And then this is an example of some fossils that are typically found within the stone as well.
Fugger is one of the few Canadian designers using it in furniture. Now he's created 3 pieces from his Montreal studio that were commissioned by the G7, including one piece inside the leaders' lounge.
This side table also acts as a vase, and it features an arrangement of Saskatoon berry flowers.
Particularly fitting because Fugger was born in Saskatchewan. Leading up to the G7, he went to Alberta to help set up the pieces. Each of these side tables weighs 1,400 pounds. While the G7 has shown off the Canadian Rockies, for Fugger, it's an opportunity to highlight the beauty of a different kind of rock.
I think as Canadians, we kind of think that, exotic materials and interesting, things are always elsewhere. And I started to really kind of look inward, like right at home, right where I live, there's this amazing material that I think should be considered exotic to the rest of the world.
Fugger's work now also on the world stage, mixing style with a uniquely Canadian substance. Kelly Gregg, CTV News, Montreal.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. I'm Sandy Ronaldo. Omar will be broadcasting live from Banff tonight at 11. But first, your local CTV News is coming up. See you tomorrow, we hope. Bye-bye.